comes now for me to introduce you to and welcome Michael Shea. Michael is our first speaker. He has over 30 years of experience in the fields of craniosacral therapy, Rolfing, Gestalt, many other mind-body modalities. He's really one of the preeminent educators, teachers within the field of craniosacral biodynamics. He's the author of a book called Somatic Psychology, and he's also the author of Biodynamic Craniosacral Therapy, Volume 1, Biodynamic Craniosacral Therapy, Volume 2, Volume 3, Volume 4, and now, just into the UK as of last week, Volume 5. So I would like to... I'd like to extend a very, very warm welcome and invite Michael Shea up onto the stage. Thank you.
Are we live? Can you hear me out there? Yeah, good, good. I'd like to start the conference and just do a brief meditation with you. So let's take this time to just get oriented to the space. Some of you are probably very new to this space. I think this is my second or third time in this space. So it's good to orient, find your feet, get located in the Brunei Gallery here. And you can have your eyes open, you can have your eyes closed. Just get a sense of where you're located in your chair, where your feet are located on the floor. And slowly, since most of us are cranial practitioners, we begin to really enjoy the stillness that gets invited by this process. Simply orienting to our body. And I'd like to do a few practices with you in my short time this morning. So this will be the first. And getting a sense of your back up against the chair. Getting a sense of your shoulders, your arms. Really getting ready to settle into your chair for 2 days. So you kind of want to fasten your seatbelt. You're going to really know this chair very well for the next 2 days. And then gradually getting a sense of your head, your neck, softening through your mouth. Whether your eyes are open or closed, making a little bit of space between your eyes. And then finally, we'll take a couple of minutes just to connect with our breath. So just getting a sense of the breath coming into the right side of your lungs. Getting a sense now of the interior of your body. Getting a sense of the breath coming into the left side of your lungs. getting a sense of the breath coming into the right side of your abdomen. Getting a sense of the breath coming into the left side of your abdomen. And at the same time, we can begin to notice the stillness in the room, sort of the stock and trade of cranial practitioners. Getting a sense of the breath coming into the right side of your pelvis. Getting a sense of the breath coming into the left side of your pelvis. And again, give yourself this opportunity to really locate your mind, your thoughts, your emotions, whatever you have had going on this morning getting here. Whether it's a glitch in the underground or a plane ride yesterday, whatever you can do to bring yourself really present in this room. And let's all take a deep breath together. Great. Thank you, and good morning to you. I'd like to also open the conference. I really appreciate being the first to go. Not only does it allow me to work through an awful lot of nervousness and then watch the other presenters do their dance, but it also feels like an honor to be able to start this conference. The feeling that our community is worldwide, it's international, that our community of craniosacral practitioners is going through a significant growth period right now. So I'd like to just give a slight invocation from the dedication in my as you recently heard, my brand new Volume 5. May all beings be parted from clinging and aversion, feeling close to some and distant from others. May they win the bliss that is especially sublime. May they find release from the sea of unbearable sorrow. And may they never be parted from freedom's true joy. Thank you. This community of ours I am so grateful for, and one of the things I wanted to mention right at the very beginning is the gratitude I have for one of my teachers originally, Dr. John Upledger. And I don't know how many of you in this room know, but Dr. Upledger died last October, November, and really largely responsible for getting this work all around the globe. And it was a great honor to be with him and to know him for the brief period of time that I studied with him and was in his teacher training. And the greatest gift that he actually gave me was the year that I was with him in my teacher training in 1986, was the year my father died. And not knowing how close he was to death, I actually got a lot of time to spend with my father. And as my training to be a teacher with Dr. Upledger was finishing, my father passed away. And it was just a gift to be able to have that much time. My parents lived a mile from the Upledger Institute. It was just totally amazing. And not only that, my parents bought a condominium across the street from my old high school. So I had to revisit my old high school every time I went home while I was in training with Dr. Upledger. So I'm very, very grateful for that opportunity. And I would also like to say that our community has right now research going on, research that's just been released regarding the efficacy of our work. And I'd like to just mention the Tranbergs from Sweden. Jorgen is here. And certainly spend some time with Jorgen talking about the research. It was just released, I believe, not too long ago. And the research in particular that was done in Sweden was on the effectiveness of our work in relieving pelvic pain in pregnant women. And as far as I know, it's the first or second efficacy study in our field. So our community is really growing, and it's a wonderful thing. And it's a great thing to be here and to present to you this morning. So let me give you a sense of where I'm going to go this morning. Now, I suppose I'm preaching to the choir, but I know everybody knows what this is, or at least most of you have had some kind of course in embryology. Who does not study or has not studied embryology? Could I see your hands? Oh, so there's a lot of new people that haven't studied the embryo. Okay. Well, I'll do my best. The title of my talk, as it's advertised, is The Heart Inside and Out. So what you're looking at here is a 6.3 millimeter embryo. It's a 30-day-old embryo. Most of the tissue has been taken away. And what you're looking at right here is the heart. So we're looking at the heart from the outside. And we'll be looking at an image of the heart from the inside. Now, the subtitle of my talk is Embodied Compassion. Now, in Volume 3, I was asked by the APA Journal, the American Pre- and Perinatal Psychology Association Journal, to write an article on the relationship of the embryonic circulatory system to the therapeutic relationship. And that actually became the genesis of Volume 3. But I didn't stop there in terms of my study of the embryology of the human heart. It's a pretty remarkable study. And what it's led me to is that the more you study the human heart, and the more you look at some of the research that's available right now, you see that, in fact, by putting your attention on the heart, studying your own heart, you begin to develop a deeper sense of empathy, and that leads to a deeper sense of compassion. And by simply listening or following your heart, literally, you can build compassion in a much stronger way. So what I'd like to do in my time with you today, which is actually very short, is condense about 5 years of study into 90 minutes without speeding up, which is not easy to do. So the notion that I want to do with you is just to do 3 basic practices with you from my classes to give you just a little bit of a sense, hopefully by the end of this presentation, on what is embodied compassion and how to sense your own heart. So the first aspect that I'm going to talk about is basically silence or stillness. Now, it turns out in embryology that to talk about stillness, we use the word in embryology quiescence. Interesting word. The word quiescence is a term used in embryology, and it's used at multiple layers. And we as cranial practitioners sometimes will use the word dynamic stillness or stillness to relate to that term. But quiescence means less metabolic activity, less activity in general. And that operates at 3 different levels, at least 3 or 4 different levels. So what I did in my Volume 5 is I looked at those levels of quiescence. Where is quiescence found? Okay. It's found whenever a cell changes shape. So when a cell changes shape, let's see what happens here. Now we're looking at the inside of the heart. And this is the inside of an embryonic heart in which the heart has become a tube and the bottom of the tube here has been brought up so that the inflow and the outflow valves right here can be in convergence with one another. So in terms of stillness and quiescence, you know the expression, "be still my heart," looking at the inside of the embryonic heart here, we see that any time when a vessel inside the embryo has this type of sharp curvature, that all of the cells in this curvature right here, this inner loop right here, get very, very narrow, like a wedge. It's called wedge-shaped epithelium. So the wedge shape, and so these cells right here, right on the inside, are going to be narrow, which means at that narrow end of the cell, there's quiescence, much less activity. But what does that mean on the other end of the cell? Look at this proliferation of cells and tissue right here, because that outer layer right here is quite active. So indeed, there is a sense of quiescence and stillness deep within the heart. You with me? Okay? So it's very, very interesting. So we have, as part of embodied compassion, this deep sense of quiescence in and around the heart. Because for those of you that have studied Dr. Blechschmidt's work, you've heard of the metabolic fields. And whenever you have a rapidly expanding structure like the heart in the embryo, you'll have a retention field associated with it, right on the outside. So the pericardium, the diaphragm, act as a retention structure, meaning a type of dynamic stillness that is restraining the growth. So both on the inside of the heart and the outside of the heart, we have this type of quiescence. You follow me? All right? So we'll do a practice in a couple minutes regarding that. So stillness and quiescence are the central feature, one of the central features of craniosacral therapy, and it's also one of the central features of the human embryo in the vascular development. Doppler radar studies have shown that the inside flow of the blood is actually a void space. So within the blood itself is a void space, is a type of quiescence. It's very, very interesting. And also we see throughout embryology the use of the term lacunae. Now, lacunae is a term, Latin term, and it means lagoon. Now, my wife and I, Kathy, sitting in the front row, we live about 2 miles from a huge lagoon. And a lagoon is an area of still fluid. And that still fluid in nature is when two bodies of water, salt water and fresh water, get together. But in the case of the embryo, when you have pockets of stillness and still fluid, it invites the maternal blood vessels to make a connection in the future placenta so that you can get nutrition through. So that level of quiescence, that level of stillness is a gesture, you could say, of the human heart of connection, of connecting the mother's nutrition, her blood, to the embryo. And those nutrients are then diffused through the cell membrane wall long before there's a placenta. And we see that also in the formation of the spine in the embryo. How many of you heard the term somite? You know what a somite is? Somites appear, and they're what designates the segmentalization of the spine and the body in general, and they form the paraspinal muscles and some of the vertebra. But the inside of these somites that appear to be like miniature vertebrae are lacunae. And you have these pockets of still fluid that is inviting the blood from the heart to connect with the neural tube. So indeed, we see biological stillness at many different levels throughout the human body. So embodied compassion begins with a sense of tuning into that sense of quiescence, or if you want to call it dynamic stillness. Okay? I don't know how many of you might have heard of this organization. It's called the Center for Compassion and Altruistic Research and Education at Stanford University. You can go to their website, CCARE, C-C-A-R-E. Now, this is a great story. Several years ago, I was on the Massage Therapy Body of Knowledge Task Force, and the political organizations in the United States put together a committee to design the academic standards and the skills and abilities for the massage industry. And I was lucky to be asked to be on that committee. And when I was co-authoring the therapeutic relationship standards, I used the word compassion, and the whole committee kind of went crazy on me. Like, can you prove it? You know, can you prove it beyond it being a religious concept or beyond it being a psychological concept? And so I had heard about this organization because they were just starting up, the Center for Compassion and Altruistic Research, and I got on the phone with the executive director, and I told him what I was doing, and he said, I'll send you my entire database tomorrow. He said, I started as a massage therapist some years ago, and then he became the executive director of this organization. But at any rate, that started me on a beautiful path of looking at the scientific literature on compassion. And so I'm not going to share with you all the literature, but you can go to this website. You can see what they have on their database. It's constantly being updated, and it's constantly amazing when we see now the science on compassion and the need for embodied compassion to reduce the amount of fear that's going on in our culture right now. So the very antidote that we need in this culture comes through a sense of compassion, but it's more embodied. And how you bring that sense of compassion to the therapeutic relationship and to your client. Okay. Now, I practiced this presentation with a number of classes, and they thought this was way over the top to show all these abstracts. So I minimized the number of abstracts I'm going to show you. Typically, when I put something like that up, you only read the title. Students were afraid that I was expecting you're going to have to read the abstract, and you'd have to read the first page. No. This is actually a very wonderful article. Upward Spirals of the Heart, Autonomic Flexibility is indexed by vagal tone, reciprocally and prospectively predicts positive emotions and social connectedness. It's a wonderful, wonderful article about vagal tone. And I was lecturing on it earlier this year in Germany. And vagal tone, or positive vagal tone, are those experiences that you have during the day that gives you a sense of resilience that you can come back to a stable state of feeling good. And the research here shows that the more vagal tone experiences that you have, they reinforce one another. It changes brain structure. And you actually have the possibility of maybe being happier longer during the day. But what was interesting to me about this particular research is they were citing other research about the ratio of vagal tone experiences that you needed to have on a day-to-day basis versus alarm states. Now, I don't know how they get this research, but the recommendation was about 11 to 1. And I'm talking about this, and my translator's translating positive vagal tone experiences, or so I thought. And I got to the point where I said, and it looks like you need to have at least 11 positive vagal tone experiences during the day. And she leans over and she says, do you really think I ought to say 11 positive vagal tone experiences? She had been translating everything I was saying. I'm not going to answer that for you. That's a very personal choice. But talk to my wife. She's the expert. At any rate, this article really inspired me to change my teaching, because sometimes in America when I teach, my students are kind of laughless or humorless or too serious. We kind of live in a constant type of crisis mentality in the United States. And it's very, very, very interesting. So I've had to hire laughing yoga instructors to come in and help my students smile last year. I flew in a friend of mine from Los Angeles to do 2 classes in laughing yoga to help the students. When I go to teach in New York City, I have to take a joke book. And sometimes I'll just look at them and I say, we are not going to continue this class until somebody smiles. I'm sorry. So I just start reading jokes. I say, it's up to you. It's up to you. So on that end, I've been doing a little bit of research on my own as I travel, and I carry a good set of cartoons with me. And so I like to test the different cultures and nationalities in terms of their sense of humor and see if we can raise vagal tone a little bit. This to me... This, to me, describes a craniosacral therapy session. You get out of your training and you go into your room and you suddenly realize that you're nowhere right here and that you've entered the middle, okay? You're part way into the session and the roadmap is gone. Well, this is just going from bad to worse. And I'm sure all of you have had that little thought in your mind when you're working. So, good. That was a good laugh. I'd say the index is going pretty well so far right here. Good. Good. This is good. This is very good. This is good. It's working. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. You know, some countries, they just kind of look at these things and they just don't get it. Except in Italy, it's very interesting. We have some Italian students here. But whenever I show these in Italy, there's a committee that translates them. And then the committee reports to the group until there's a consensus on, and then the laughter just begins rippling through the room. So I would say the Italians have the most fun with these. Okay. Okay, so now we'll look at the second phase of what I want to get into here, listening to your heart. This is the Bashara article, 2004, so it's got some mileage on it, but it's a very interesting article, and it's about interoceptive awareness. And what I'd like to suggest to you is if stillness is the first part of embodied compassion, then the second part of embodied compassion is the ability to listen to your heart. It's called interoceptive awareness. It's called interoception. All sorts of different authors have different names for it. My preference is that one author calls it cardioception. When we have focused attention and on the sensation, the felt sense of the heart, okay? So this is an article that talks about listening to the heart and interoceptive awareness. And the more you listen to your heart, the more you're able to down-regulate your amygdala, the fear center of the brain. So what I'd like to do with you right now is just a listening to the heart exercise, and it'll be our second practice. So if we go ahead and settle again as we did the first time. Thank you, Michael. So let's go ahead and locate your body again. Locate your feet. Locate your pelvis. You could imagine that you're about to practice a session or do a session with a client. For those of you that are cranial practitioners, for those of you that aren't, just settling in and getting a sense of relaxation in your body. Now, it turns out in embryological development that the pericardium actually comes first, followed by the diaphragm, the respiratory diaphragm. And then the heart sort of fills in. So let's get a sense of our breath. So in the first practice, what we did was bring the breath into the right and left side of your lungs, getting acquainted with that whole space of the thorax. Bringing your breath into your abdomen. And then bringing your breath down into your pelvic floor, into the right and left side of your pelvic floor. And then I would invite you to simply get a sense of the movement of your respiratory diaphragm. And then just noticing the rise and fall. This is not a breathing technique at all. This is just simply bringing your attention to something that's moving in your body, in the middle of your body. Anatomically, it's called your respiratory diaphragm. But if you really let go of the anatomy and just sense the movement of your diaphragm, you'll notice that there's a beacon, pulsation that's occurring right on top of your diaphragm. And it's your heart, the elusive obvious. So bringing your attention to your heart. Now, one of the things that happens frequently is in students that are not accustomed or used to bringing attention to the movement of the heart, it seems like it tends to accelerate. And sometimes that's accurate, but many times it's just a generalized awareness of the pulsation expanding and increasing the area of awareness within the trunk. So assuming that you can feel your heartbeat right now without taking your pulse. See how big of an area in your trunk, in your abdomen, you can sense the movement of your heart. It's actually a very old Sufi exercise. So for some of you, you might be able to sense the movement of the blood moving through the aorta. Perhaps the pulsation through the subclavian arteries, carotid arteries. The descending aorta. The abdominal aorta. So keeping attention on a global sense of your body, at the surface, just observing the movement of the heart. And it's a very, very intimate practice to get to know your own heart in this way. Most of us in here have family or friends who have heart conditions medically. And heart conditions can be a very scary thing. So again, paying attention to your heart can actually reduce the fear. And as we do this, notice the stillness in the room. Notice how the stillness is able to deepen a little bit more than a half an hour ago. So you can allow some of your attention in the space around your body, outside, in this room, and listen to your heart. Remember that stillness is an intrinsic part of embodied compassion, whether it's on the outside or the inside of your body. And cardioception is the second gateway into this embodied compassion. Now I'm going to make you an offering while we're still in the middle of this practice, and that is the homework that I give students that I practice every day myself. This is a great antidote for insomnia. Most of us wake up in the middle of the night because we're at rest. Sometimes our hearts are really, really noisy, very loud. And I would suggest that you take a poem or a prayer that you've memorized and say it non-verbally in the cadence of your heart. You can take a minute to try that right now. For those of you that have a favorite poem or a prayer that you like, one that hopefully gives you peace or a sense of tranquility, you can actually say it non-verbally in the cadence of the beat of your heart. Again, noticing the stillness in the room. Let's all take a deep breath together. Good. How you doing? Okay? All right. I'm not sure if it's a cure for jet lag either, because I know some of the presenters and other people are jet lagged. You're probably falling asleep now, but that's okay. So we have a sense of embodied compassion, and we work with stillness, which is part of what we do. We work with cardioception, bringing our attention to the heart, the relationship of the heart to diaphragm. It's one unit of function. And this third phase that I'd like to talk to you about right now, show you some images, is the actual development of the inside of the heart. So this is from the O'Reilly and Mueller book. They're considered to be the experts in embryology. And we see here three phases, typically, of the heart in its development. The first phase is called plexiform, the second is called tubular, and the third is called looped. This is the plexiform stage right here, gives you these blood islands that coalesce, that come together. And I call this plexiform stage the transparency stage, because you've got flow through from front to back. You still have flow through from front to back in the tubular stage, but it's becoming a tube and it's starting to stretch. So in the tubular phase, I call that the stretching phase. And I have practices that we do with all this, but we're not going to do them this morning. Now, the looped phase is very interesting. The looped phase is the phase where your heart actually gets turned upside down. And one of the most amazing things when you study the human heart and the embryological development, it's the most unembryonic of all of our structures, because the way it starts in the embryo is not the way it ends up in its final anatomical position. All other structures in the embryo more or less start and grow into their final structure. The human heart, though, is very, very different. The atrium, as you know, are at the top, the ventricles at the bottom, but in the embryo it's reversed. The atrium's at the bottom. And so it presents a very interesting situation where you have to get the bottom back up to the top. And the way it does that is by turning itself upside down. So let's take a look. I've got an animation here that I think will be good. Gary, let's see if this works today. This was done at the University of Freiburg in Switzerland. It's probably the most accurate animation I've seen. You're looking at the very beginning here. It's stadium 9, stage 9 embryo. So we're looking at something that's about 1 millimeter, maybe 2 millimeters, and we're also at about 24, 25 days. There's a whole range here in terms of possibility, 24, 25 days post-fertilization. So let's look at these three stages several times. Stretching phase, tubular phase. Now watch it go through its looping. C curve and then an S curve. Now watch what that has to do. Your heart has to get turned upside down. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. Totally amazing. Let's look at that again. So, plexiform stage, transparency stage. Okay, now the tube, it's stretching. Then we get the looping. It starts to loop, rotate, bend, and turn upside down. Yeah. I actually, for me, if you really look at this, between the transparency and the stretching and the turning upside down, you'd have to say also, I'd like using the metaphor that these are also 3 stages of compassion. When you really look at your own life and the need to be transparent with your heart sometimes, and also the frequency with which your heart needs to be stretched in certain situations. These are really, really valuable metaphors that the embryo can teach us. And how many times have you had your heart turned upside down emotionally or otherwise? Okay? I only got a few grins on that. So. I've been divorced twice. I could be a tour guide in hell. So my heart not only got turned upside down, but it kind of got turned into a knot, you know. So. I'm working on that. Let's look at an older animation of this dilation, which I like a lot. Now you're just looking at the tubular phase, and watch the expansion of that end phase. Can everybody see that? Okay. Isn't that amazing? So again, beautiful sense of the heart dilating. It's called a dilation field. Beautiful animation. Great. Now let me show you a couple of other images here before because this is really the kind of the guts of what I want to talk about. The heart of what I want to talk about, excuse me. This is an image here, again, of the transparency phase, because what I'd like to do with you in a couple minutes as our final practice is a practice on transparency. And here you can see a more accurate drawing taken from an embryo of this plexiform stage, stage 8, days 16 to 18. So these are blood islands coming together. And where are they coming together? They're coming together in the region of your neck, right here, okay? So this is where your heart starts. And its fulcrum is at the 3rd cervical or 4th cervical vertebra. And it takes several weeks for the heart to grow down out of the neck region into the heart, into the trunk here. So it's in the neck so that it can get hooked up to all the neural crest cells that are going to become the autonomic nervous system part of the heart. I like this because you see the heart here. I don't know how I got that, but at any rate, this is the transparency phase. And I like the transparency phase a lot, and we're going to do a transparency phase practice in a moment. But it gives you a sense of the transparency. Now, I brought all these items here, so I got to do showtime with you. And I caught the big one. All right. The last time I was on this stage, I used this physio ball, and I showed the development of the heart this way, that the heart actually develops in the region of the neck. And the reason I used a physio ball was because proportionally, this is how large the heart gets. It comes way outside the body wall. So my heart, if I were an embryo at being my size, would actually be a little bit larger than this, proportionally. Of course, and then the whole body starts to grow around it. But there is a few days when the heart is actually exceptionally large. Okay, so that's the last presentation I did here, I think 2 or 3 years ago, or 4 years ago. Now, I went across the street from where I lived, and I bought a fishnet because I thought it was a great idea to give you a metaphor for transparency. Okay? Because when you're working with transparency, you need to have a sense that we'll do in a couple of minutes that the pores of your skin are relatively open, especially the front and back of your trunk, so that you can get a sense of something moving through. All right? Whether it's primary respiration or the long tide, the kind of things we talk about as cranial practitioners, or whether you can actually sense the electromagnetic field, which is what the heart math people talk about. So, 2 minutes of usage for my prop. Now, it isn't everybody that carries a heart with them in a bag, but I happen to carry a heart in my bag here. Now, I'm sure some of you in classes have seen the Torrent Wasp video of how they dissect a heart. And you can take a human heart or a bovine heart, and you can actually dissect it back to its tubular form. This is a scale model of a human heart, and Dr. van der Waal has done such a fascial dissection at the University of Maastricht, and taken a human heart and very gradually worked the fascial fibers apart so that you can actually see the tubular phase. And like I said, the atrium at the bottom here, the ventricles are at the top, and the atrium here have to get convoluted and brought back up. And so they're turned upside down. Isn't that amazing? Amazing little model. I get to use it maybe 6 minutes a year. I don't use a skull anymore. I got to carry this around. It's fun teaching the heart. Okay, so we've got this. I get more photographs now than the fishnet. How come? Okay. You feel free to play with this during the break. All right, so those are our 3 phases. I have some beautiful... This is a lovely image that my translator in Sweden, Margareta Stevenson. Margareta, are you here today? Margareta sent me this because she thought that this was a beautiful example of transparency. This is an Andrew Wyeth painting, and it's called Pentecost. And you see the fisherman nets, just like the one I brought with me, although the one I brought with me is more decorative. And you see the sense of transparency, of just air moving through it. Okay? And one of my favorite painters, Rene Magritte, this is a Magritte painting. Starting in 1936, Magritte, and the Magritte Museum is in Brussels. He's from Belgium. Starting in 1936, he started painting a series of images that he called The Therapist. So there you go. Now, and he did these images starting in 1936, and the last one he did was in the early 60s before he died. This was in the middle phase. I like this one a lot. I actually gave this as a graduation gift to a class of mine one time in making reproductions. But it's that sense of transparency. That was the first one that he did in 1936. But again, the sense of transparency, interesting drawing a bird cage, but at least the bird cage is open. Yeah. So let's do our last practice. So we have a sense of embodied compassion. We have the stillness we get from paying attention to our breath and simply settling. So we take a few moments to settle. Just settle with your breath. And this time, you can also sense the relationship again of the breath, the breathing, to your heart. It's really difficult to separate those two out. They're right connected with one another. So paying attention to both of them, the breath and your heart rate at the same time, is a single unit of function. Now this time in this practice, what I'd like to invite you to do is simply place your attention in back of your heart. For those of you that are more anatomically inclined, that would be your dorsal pericardium, that original space in which the heart developed. Before there was a heart, there was an early primordium of the dorsal pericardium. So somewhere in back of your heart, letting your attention notice the movement of your heart, letting your attention notice the movement of your diaphragm. And now we get into application. The application of stillness, the application of the breath and cardioception, the application of transparency to sense your client. So from the space in back of your heart, you're simply bringing attention to the people that are sitting in front of you. And if you're sitting in the front here, bringing attention to the people in back of you. Now we're multitasking with our attention. You've got to have your feet on the ground, your pelvis in the chair. Very light sense of the breath. Very light sense of the heart. And from that place, we bring our attention to the people in back of us, in front of us. And what I would invite you to sense, it's as if there's a very gentle magnetic push and pull. A very gentle magnetism around your sternum, the front of your chest, and likewise in back, in the spine. So I'm going to tune in to all of you because all of you are sitting in front of me. And we're in this really, really big heart field now. And then just noticing if there's a very subtle shift, as if you're being pulled in the opposite direction, either backwards or forwards. So again, multitasking with your attention. Very light touch with your breath, very light touch with the heart. And just resting in this ocean of stillness we have in the room. And it seems that this push and pull, if we're actually tuning into it, happens about once a minute. It's a very natural way that our attention moves. A tempo that has been called the long tide in osteopathy. You can go deeper, you can actually sense something that's moving through you. And allow yourself to be very transparent around your heart. And let's take a deep breath together again. Was that interesting? How many of you felt some sense of the push-pull, subtle as it was, is? Good, some of you. Keep at it. Good. We have plenty of time left. This is a good thing. I want to show you a very interesting movie. I think it was made here in Great Britain. And it's a study of murmuration. It's a study of thousands of starlings flying together. And it really gives you a sense of the nature of transparency. And it's a metaphor for me of the heart developing. And Gary, we do have sound with this one. beautiful? Amazing. So the last couple of minutes, I would like to leave the last 10 minutes open for questions. So I've got just a couple of minutes left, and I want to show you a couple of interesting pieces. This is a piece of research that came out about mother and infant coordinating their heart rhythms together. And again, we start with stillness, cardioception, transparency, and we look at the application. We see that the literature is showing us more and more that the minute we make contact, and actually this says within a second, mothers and infants begin to synchronize their heartbeat together. Within a second, okay? Research just came out of Japan 4 weeks ago that holding an infant or carrying an infant substantially reduces their heart rate, okay? So this is very, very important for us as therapists, the notion of embodied compassion, because the moment we make contact with our client, we need to bring our attention right back into our body to sense our own heart in order to feel it synchronizing with the entire cardiovascular system and autonomic nervous system of the client. And we get this information right through our heart. Any of these processes that begin here are maintained throughout the life in any relationship you have, not just between a mother and a baby. So it's a very, very important piece to understand in the application of this work. So when you take these little pieces that we've had an hour and a half to explore with you into the treatment room, it's for you to be able to sense your heart more and more and make more and more space for it. The Sufi practice is very interesting because they encourage that this sensibility of cardioception be something that you feel throughout your entire body and can access like that no matter who you're with. I've talked to people that have been to conventions of Sufi practitioners, and they say it's a very amazing experience to be with people that do that practice, where their whole body is just, their whole vascular system is pulsing when they're looking at you. So they're not looking at you with their eyes, they're looking at you with their heart and their whole vascular system. And we can begin to do that, okay, with our clients and gain very, very valuable information about helping them as they resonate with our heart. For the past, I almost said for the past several years, I've been taking a seminar on the care of death and dying. I'm hitting my mid-60s, and it's a bit of a concern to me now that I have some sense of preparation. So I've been studying, one of the faculty members is Joan Halifax, and she wrote this article in the Journal of Pain and Symptom Management in January 2011. And it's called The Precious Necessity of Compassion. And it's actually a beautiful article. Pretty sure you can get this, download this off the internet. I've tried to upload it to my Facebook page, but there's a technical glitch with that right now. It's not able to do that. And you can see the quote by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, "Love and compassion are necessities. They are not luxuries," okay? Without them, humanity cannot survive. And I would like to say as a PS, it's biologically driven. It's neurologically driven. It's cardiovascularly driven. We are embodied compassion, and that's the bottom line. Now, I laughed because I've been taking this seminar for the last 2 or 3 years, but the other reason I was taking it is I was working on a terminal unit for 12 years with death and dying with no experience hardly at all. So I thought after 12 years I ought to find out how to manage myself a little bit better when I'm around someone who's dying. And this is a beautiful article, and it's something I teach from in all the classes that I do. And that is 2 points that she makes about us because we are all caregivers. Whether or not we're giving care to our clients, I know that all of us give care to a lot of other people in our community. If it's not of our parents, our friends, whatever, we are caregivers. That is the nature of our life and our business. And she says two interesting things here, and I've seen it on this terminal unit, and that is, you've got to have a commitment to self-care. Okay? You've got to build in a wisdom aspect to your own care and make a commitment. And I realized in this seminar that I was taking with her that I had not made a commitment. I actually thought I was taking good care of myself when I wasn't, because I hadn't made a commitment. And the other dynamic that she talks about, whatever your spiritual practice is, you have to make a commitment to that spiritual practice and make it alive and make it something that you do on a regular basis. Whether that's every minute, every hour, or 20 minutes a day, whatever your practice is. So a commitment to self-care and a commitment to your spiritual practice. Okay? So that's what I have to say to you today. And I'd like to take the last 9 minutes, 8 minutes for a couple of questions. Yeah, I think we have time for that. So who are the microphone runners? Aha. Run, run, run. They're on the run. Who has a question? Aha, in the back there. Now you have to wait until you get the microphone so we get you on the imperishable record of a DVD.
Thank you very much. Can you hear that?
I sure can.
First of all, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed listening to you. If we're going to get that integrated with our client or whoever it may be, with our vascularity, so to speak, how do we protect ourselves? Because when we see a lot of patients each day, it's very easy to become drained, and I've developed mechanisms of protecting my own energy. But you're talking about becoming very intimately engaged with the patient, which
Yes.
I'd love to do because I feel compassion like anybody else, but
Right.
you do have to step back to protect yourself from becoming totally drained if you're not careful.
For me, if you look at the literature on interpersonal neurobiology and interpersonal cardiovascular systems, we enter into a merged state with the client. It doesn't take long to start building representations of the client's feelings and their body inside of our body. So for me, there's no way to protect. So I want to state that first. Now, that being said, since we do enter into a merged state, and in that sense of the word, there's no way to protect ourselves, we need to develop a type of a ritual that we do of cleansing ourselves, of draining ourselves. Now, the practice of transparency is very helpful because it's something that you can feel the client's energy in you, but you can also allow it to move through you. Okay? So there's the in-session practice of transparency, but there's also the in-between sessions where all of us, and I'll bet all of us, if you really look consciously at what you're doing in your clinical practice, we have these little things that we do after the session that are ritually oriented. Whether that's washing your hands, I go in and I wash my hands with ice cold water. Okay? And then at the end of the day, because my office is by my mango grove, I grow mangoes. I didn't get into that, but you have to come to my classes to get into the mango thing with me. Or you can go to my YouTube site and look at my wife and I doing how to eat a mango. So go to my YouTube channel. But we live in the tropics. I live in the tropics. There's always weeds. And at the end of the day, I always take 3 or 4 minutes and get my hands in the soil. And I pull weeds. And it actually gets me into no mind. Boom, clients are gone. And there's a ritual that I have of them draining into the ground. So in session, in between session, at the end of the day. I worked with a kahuna healer from Hawaii, and she recommended smoking a cigarette after each. So, like an idiot, of course, I was living in Boulder where anything goes back in the 80s. Like an idiot, I got, short barrel Camels, and I'm just doing a cigarette after each one until one client looked up at me, and I had the vault hold, and she just looked up and she said, "Your hands stink." Okay? So that was the last I did my ritual with tobacco. But at any rate, another question? Questions? Ah, there you are, over here.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was fabulous.
Oh, thank you.
It might just have been a kind of slightly casual use of words, but you said towards the end about the hearts coordinating, that the client's heart gets in rhythm with yours.
Correct.
It's that way around.
It's a two-way street. So in this business of the merged state, the reason why you bring attention to your own body, so the way I work is I have my hands, they go to the client, but then I withdraw my attention back to my own body, the space around me. And it takes several minutes for my heart to register what's going on in the connection. And then I might work with my breath. I might work with other types of attention faculties and practices. And there's many pieces you can do until that starts to build a resonance. Because if I'm doing something to stabilize my own cardiovascular system, then that by nature, then, by definition, would create a resonance with the client. They, in turn, have to do what I do. Not all of them do that because of the nature of some of the trauma that people have. But nonetheless, it sets a context for a possibility. So the more time you spend with your own body, sensing your own body, you create differentiation. These are studies in mirror neurons. So as you begin to create these representations of the person in your brain and body, you then differentiate yourself simply by paying attention to your own body and your own sensation, but especially the heart and the vascular system. And then the second step is the creation of resonance. Okay? Does that help?
Yes, thank you. And I guess that is also the beginning of the cleansing when you need to, after the session.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. How are we doing? One more question?
Hi.
One more question? Yes.
Sorry.
Hi.
Thank you very much for that. Wonderful lecture. I wanted to ask you, I'm speaking to a lady recently whose husband had had a heart bypass surgery. And she said that as part of the surgery, they actually stopped the heart or were working on the heart and kind of removed it from the rest of the body. And she said afterwards that he was extremely grumpy for several weeks afterwards. Very rude, slightly out of it, and very grumpy. And swearing and so on. She's very uncharacteristic. And she said apparently she had been told by the hospital that this was not unusual. And they gave her the comparison of a kind of, they said it's not endorphins, but it's like a comparison. It's like the person, because their heart has been removed, they lose that endorphin kind of connection. But she said it's not that, but it's like that. Now, do you know anything about it? Because I was immediately intrigued that somebody who'd lost their heart momentarily should have this kind of sudden change of literally heart. So I wondered if you knew anything about it.
Well, I'm not a medical doctor, but yes, I have heard about it. I mean, my father died of congestive heart failure, and now that I'm in the business of teaching the heart, I have to be up a little bit on some of the conditions that people get into. So it's not unusual at all for that type of a reaction to occur. A lot of people that have gone through heart surgery get depressed. I watched my father go through a lot of mood swings with all the heart surgeries and things that he went through. So it's not unusual at all. Now the question is, therapeutically, can we as craniosacral therapists put our hands on people like that and mitigate some of the side effects from surgery? I believe the answer is yes. Okay? And part of what I'm teaching is actually how to get your hands on the arteries and veins in the heart itself and tune into the cranial rhythm through the vascular system in order to mitigate some of these circumstances. And I can tell you, having taught this now for about 2 years, that the results are phenomenal. The feedback I'm getting from some of my clients and also from the majority of the students that I'm working with are remarkable, the depth at which you can get to when you're in contact with the cardiovascular system. So, by all means, thank you. I think we're done. I love you. Thank you.
Stay on stage for a moment, Michael. Stay on stage for a moment.
Can I just ask everyone to wait in the hall just for a couple of minutes? Please wait in the hall. First of all, I just want to extend, heartfelt thanks to Michael. And just thank you, Michael, for leaving me with a very warm feeling in my heart, front and back, and really appreciate your talk and your presence and the gift of love and compassion that you bring to your work. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
If I can ask you, just to remain in here for a couple of minutes, I want to just go through a few announcements. To let you know, Michael Shea is going to be teaching a workshop in London next February. That's February 20th to 23rd. And the theme of the workshop is called Heart to Heart. It's a 4-day workshop which is open for cranial osteopathy